Hello, my friends. Hello, and thank you so much for coming back to spend an additional part of your day with me. Today is, I always have to look in the corner of my screen, Monday, September 23rd, 2024. And I have a really great show for you today. And you guys are so excited. I know so many of you watched the Gregg trial with me last week. It's so hard to believe that it was only last week. It feels like a year ago already. And it was only a week ago today that opening statements started in the afternoon. And then by Friday, we had a verdict. I'll wait for a few more people to get in before we start. I don't know. Is there something wrong with the sound? Somebody said, what's with the sound? Is there something wrong? There seems to be like a very big delay on YouTube right now. Mods, or how's my sound? Testing, 1, 2. Audio sounds great to me, says Sarah. Thanks, Sarah. Maybe refresh your browser if you're having an issue with your sound. What do you think about that? So we watched last week 14-year-old, now 15-year-old Gregg tried for first-degree murder and attempted murder and tampering with evidence for a crime that was committed only 6 months ago, March 19th of 2024. And you remember during the trial, I said, today's the 6-month anniversary of this crime. In Mississippi, Rankin County, Gregg, 14 years old at the time of the crime and 15 now, was tried as an adult in 4 days, 6 months after she killed her mother. And we had a verdict sentencing her to life in prison without the possibility of parole in an adult prison. And you, many of you, I won't say all of you, but I was really conflicted about this case, because how can we try 14-year-olds as adults who, in my opinion, clearly have mental health issues and throw them into adult prison without the possibility of parole, without any sort of mental help ever, and just throw away the key? Like, we're just giving up on our kids. I don't get it. I'm upset about it. And I know a lot of you were upset about it. And so many people just felt like she did the crime, she should do the time. Too bad, so sad, throw away the key. And it saddens me. It saddens me that that's kind of like the way, I don't know, society is becoming so numb to these types of cases and these types of crimes that we are so quick to throw a child. And yeah, she's a child. Anybody who's ever had a 14-year-old, you know that that is still a child. Some kids at 14 don't even have their period yet, okay? And we're going to throw them in jail for the rest of their natural lives and just say it's too bad. She's been in solitary confinement for 6 months, for 23 hours a day. And her entire family, including her mom's parents, her grandparents on her mother's side, and her stepfather and his mother, have been behind her this entire time. They argued and wanted her bail to be reduced from $1 million, and it never was. Absolutely share the live stream. Go on. Go on with your bad self, Miss Jones. Please do. We need more eyes on this. We need more eyes on this. So after the verdict, I know so many of you were very, very saddened by it and just felt hopeless and are still maybe saddened by it. So I reached out to her attorney, Bridget Todd, just on a whim. And I said, listen, I have a YouTube channel. I don't know if you know anything about, the coverage that's been going on about this case, but so many of my viewers really want to talk to you and your personal experiences with Carly. And there's so much more we want to know. I had so many questions. Why? Why did this happen? Why did she do this? And then when it wasn't until the defense's case in chief that we started learning so much more about Carly's history and about what happened to Carly as a child. And, in my mind, childhood trauma is real and that can affect you for the rest of your life. And I can't even say it as eloquently as my guest can. I am so honored to present to you today one of Gregg's defense attorneys, Bridget Todd, who is here to answer your questions and help us make sense of the Gregg case. Hi, Bridget.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for doing this. Everyone has so many questions for you, and it was so nice to talk to you on the phone yesterday.
You too.
And we're just flabbergasted by this whole thing. So maybe just to start, why don't you tell, so many people had wanted to know, one of the initial questions was, were you appointed by the court as a public defender to defend Carly or private counsel? And how did you become involved in the case?
I was private counsel, so was Kevin Camp. Um, I uh, I met Carly's family on March 22nd, which was also the first day that I met Carly. And after I met Carly, who was just could not stop crying long enough and would not look up from the floor while talking to me because she was just so devastated.
And this was 3 days, just so everyone's clear. It was 3 days after
Yes.
the crime, after she killed her mom.
And in
And
fact,
where
Carly
did
believed that her stepfather was, at that time, Carly thought her stepfather was dead too because no one had told her that wasn't the case. So when I was able to tell her that her stepfather was okay and that he was actually already back home, she was really relieved to hear that.
where was she when you met her?
She was in the detention center in Rankin County.
So her family reached out to you, I guess, and that's how you got involved?
Yes.
And so was it because Carly did not qualify for a public defender?
Carly would not have qualified for a public defender.
I don't even understand how that's possible. She's 15 years old. She's clearly has no assets. Her mom is now gone. Like, how does that work?
Well,
What are
she didn't have assets, but the family in and of themselves had assets. So she couldn't plead indigent. Although, when you're talking about bond, that's two different things, because you have to look at a person's actual income, not their family's income.
and her bond was set at $1 million.
Yes. Based on the
And
charges.
what made you want to become involved in this case?
Well, immediately one of the first things I knew was about the medication change. And it really hit home for me because back in June of 2021, my younger brother committed suicide after being put on medication by his doctor that he went to seeking help. And I know a lot of people say, well, suicide is different than violence. Well, the day before he committed suicide, he had actually pointed a gun at my mom.
Oh my God.
Uh, and she said he just wasn't himself. I knew something was terribly wrong. He just wasn't himself. So the case hit close to home, and I knew that medication could cause these problems and could, make someone violent, make someone suicidal, make someone completely not themselves in a very short period of time. And so that's why I really wanted to take this case. And because the family had limited assets, and it was so close to my heart, I agreed to take the case pro bono. And I reached out to my good friend, Kevin Camp, who is a phenomenal defense attorney and who has been practicing criminal law for 30 years. And I asked him if he would work it with me, and he agreed to do it pro bono as well.
First of all, let me just say I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry. This obviously was a very personal case to you, and out of the kindness of your heart, you agreed to represent her for free. In case, for those of you who don't know in the chat, pro bono means for free. And your friend Kevin agreed to do it for free as well. Like, that's just,
Yeah.
I can't even, like, there are no words. Like, the defense that you put on would have cost, right?
Oh, God.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
At least. And,
Mhm.
and there are a lot of things that we wish that we would have had the resources to do that we just didn't have the resources to do. One of the things we thought about was trying to get a brain scan, because these days you can actually go to a neurologist and have brain scans, and they can show, they can show depression. It can show all these different, effects and emotions, but we just, didn't have the time for that. And we didn't have the money for that.
And the family didn't have the money for
Oh,
that. And
no. And defense attorneys can't, we're prohibited from using our own funds to, litigate a case.
wow, so you're allowed to donate your time and energy and work, but just you can't donate money for experts and things like that. That's just heartbreaking. It just that's what makes the system so unfair in so many ways. And the other thing that people were wondering is, why was it so fast? Why did this case, because we trial watch here, that's what we do. And I've never seen a case that was tried to verdict within 6 months of the crime. It's crazy.
Neither had I, and neither had Kevin, who'd been doing this for 30 years. The only thing, I mean, it was the judge pushing the case to move forward as quickly as it was. And I don't think he was doing it to hurt Carly. I think it really weighed on him that there was a 14-year-old who turned 15 in jail being held in solitary confinement, who also, it's not just the fact that she was in solitary confinement. She was not allowed any visitors because the detention center that she was being held at is an adult detention center. So that means she can't be within sight or sound of any other adult in the facility, including inmates. So while the Rankin County Detention Center is set up for visitation for adults, it's not set up for visitation for minors that are being held there. So the only time Carly got out of her cell is if one of her attorneys went to see her that day.
I'm really speechless, but that makes, I'm heartbroken by that. So the only time she ever saw anybody is if you or Kevin went to see her. She couldn't see her stepfather. She couldn't see her grandparents. She couldn't see anybody. They weren't even allowed to go. Did she had some sort of device, I guess, because I remember Heath did testify that he was speaking to her every day. So she had some way to talk on the phone, or how did that work?
So originally, the state put a no contact order in place between Heath and Carly, and they would not rescind it upon request. So that was one of the reasons Heath had to retain a private attorney, was to represent his interest. And it was only into, I think, June 23rd was the day that the judge finally granted his motion to rescind no contact order. So it was only after June 23rd that they were able to start talking on. They used like this iPad sort of device, and that's what they used for people to do telephone calls on.
Wow. That's, again, 23 hours a day, 14 years old. You know her probably better than anyone else that I could even speak to, because you spent so much time with her one-on-one. Who makes the determination about whether a child is going to be tried as an adult in the state of Mississippi?
Well, unfortunately, in the state of Mississippi, by statute, we have a statute that says anyone who commits a crime with a gun who is over the age of 13 or older, is automatically certified as an adult.
I see.
So it was by statute. It wasn't that a judge necessarily made a determination or the state made a determination. It's the statute that we have, and several other states have similar statutes.
Wow. Okay. Well, I guess that makes sense. I'm just going to put this right out there, because so many people in the chat while we were watching the trial were suspecting that Heath had something to do with this. Perhaps there was some sort of inappropriate relationship between Carly and Heath. And what do you have to say to that?
Well, first of all, Heath, I was not retained by Heath or the maternal grandparents because I work for Bono. Right. I work for Carly Gregg, and nobody was in the room with Carly and I. And there, for the first few months, I would go to see Carly every day, just because I knew it was hard for her to be in solitary confinement, and she was having such a difficult time emotionally. It really wasn't until she started the Abilify, and the Abilify had a little bit of time to kick in, that she was able to really converse, hold conversations without being just so, emotionally wrought. If that was the case, Carly would have had no reason not to tell me that. And there were a lot of things that Carly told me that she said when she told me, "You're the only person I've ever told this to before. I've never told anybody this before you." And I think just because I'm a mom and Carly's a kid, and I was the only person she could see, I mean, we really, a bond developed pretty quickly. And even during her mental health evaluation with Dr. Clark, he made a comment during the evaluation about, you seem like you and your attorney have a pretty close bond. And Carly said, yeah, Bridget's the only mom I have left now. And so there would have been no reason for Carly not to tell me that. But she didn't, because it just didn't happen. And we were all, and I'll say this, I had no idea. I did not have time and was not reading any, news feeds or even had time to watch the news or anything like this. So I had no idea the kind of coverage this case had gotten until after we had sent the case back to the jury. And Kevin and I were sitting in the courtroom waiting for the jury to come back. And we were both just exhausted. And Kevin said, oh, why don't we, and we knew Court TV had been in the room. But even then, I know Court TV is a channel. I never watch it.
You don't have time. You're practicing law.
No. And, when you get home from trying cases all day, the last thing you want to do is watch somebody else try a case.
Right.
You're just burnt out. And so he said, oh, why don't we get on, and we knew it had some local coverage. And he was like, oh, why don't we get on Facebook and see what people are saying? Because back in May, Kevin and I had done a case in Hinds County that had gotten a lot of local coverage, and people always hate defense attorneys. And so we would read the comments, on our lunch breaks or, for just a few minutes after the case to see what people were saying. And it was always funny. We laughed about it. And he was like, pull it up and let's see what people are saying. He was like, let's see how many times you got called Karen this week. And I was like, yeah, okay. And so I pulled it up. And as soon as I pulled it up and I realized, A, how much coverage it had gotten, and B, how many people had sort of their own devices developed this theory that would really all of us thought was just crazy and kind of came out of the blue about some type of romantic relationship between Carly and Heath. Like that, it's just odd to me. And I think that's a really dangerous thing about having social media involved in litigation, is people just can come up with bizarre theories that came out of nowhere, and then it just takes off like wildfire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people could not reconcile the fact that Heath was standing behind her, that he was so supportive of her, despite the fact that she had killed his wife, and they had such a hard time understanding the family support, especially from Heath, but also from Ashley's parents. And I mean, I guess by extension, Heath's mother as well. Can you talk a little bit about that, the family support?
Yes. And, in some things I think, and I would not wish any of this on any person. I think it's too much for anyone to really handle. But I think back to my own parents who, I just don't think my dad will ever recover and be the same. And, and the same for my mom, but she's handled it a little bit better. But my own brother pointed a gun at her the day before he committed suicide. And that just was not Brad. That was not anything he would have ever done in his right mind. And, one of the things that my mom told me, I think after day 3 of watching the case, because she is I jokingly refer to her as my unofficial, unpaid, and unwanted social media consultant. So she would tell me, like usually every day on the way home from work, she would call and tell me a few things that somebody had said. But, one of the things that she said that people really had a hard time understanding why the maternal family was supporting Carly and while her stepdad was supporting her since he had been a victim of a crime. And my mom said, I'm a mom and I had children and I've lost a child. And she said, and I think back to that day with Brad and she said, at the moment, I didn't know if he was going to kill me or not. It was just such a bizarre moment. But I think back to it even more now that I'm watching Carly's case. And if Brad would have shot me that day, I would have still hoped that my child would have gotten the help he needed and not just be punished for something he could not fully understand what he was doing because of the medication he was on.
Yeah.
I think that really resonates with me as a mom. And that's one of the things Heath repeatedly said, is he said, I'm going to keep telling the truth about what happened that day, regardless of how many times law enforcement threatens me with charges, regardless of how many times the DA's office threatens me and makes me feel like I might be charged, because I'm not changing my story. But I'm going to tell the truth as it happened, because that is exactly what Ashley would want. She would be rolling over in her grave if she knew they were trying to put Carly in jail for the rest of her life, because that is the last thing she would have wanted for her daughter.
So you had many conversations with Heath, I take it?
Not many. He had his own attorney, but like on that Saturday, March 23rd, Kevin and I went to the house. And he was there, and so were the other family members, because we wanted to, walk through and hear from Heath everything that happened that day. We wanted to see Carly's room, to see the floor plan of the house, to walk around the neighborhood, just to try to get a feel for it, which I think is something that all defense attorneys, or really any attorney, should do, because it's a really bad call to try to talk about and make sense of a situation that you don't have a personal understanding of.
Right, absolutely. Got to visit the crime scene, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't even say that people hate defense. I would just say people hate attorneys in general.
Yeah.
No special extra hate for defense attorneys. I think the average person just says that they hate attorneys until they need one. Always.
Yeah. And I would say that, a lot of times people think that, I think people don't always realize that defense attorneys are really constitutional attorneys, in the sense that the reason you still have the Fourth Amendment, which protects citizens against improper search and seizure, the Fifth Amendment, the right to a fair trial, the right to not incriminate yourself, the Sixth Amendment, to call witnesses in your own defense, and due process and also the right to confront witnesses who are making accusations against you at trial, is because defense attorneys get up every day and go defend these rights. Because if we didn't, the state, who is constantly butting against it and trying to edge away at those freedoms, they would be gone.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Heath was fully investigated, right?
Yes. And also, I know a lot of people made comments about, is there an insurance policy? Yeah, there was. And Carly was the beneficiary.
Wow. And because she killed her mother, she probably wasn't allowed to collect, right?
I believe that's the case. They have a Slayer statute. If you are, if you were found guilty of killing someone, then you don't get the policy.
Exactly. Wow. So during the pretrial shenanigans, we saw a lot of, rulings that people were commenting, was the defense's fault. For example, the judge precluded some of your witnesses from testifying because what Judge Dewey K. Arthur said was a late exchange, and you didn't, comply with the statute and give, the word for word testimony that these, and I think some of them were relatives. You can tell us about the other ones that were precluded. What do you say to that, Bridget?
First of all, there's no statute that gives you a timeline. It's the Mississippi Rules of Criminal Procedure, which gives you have 10 days prior to trial to disclose that information. We disclosed that information to the state on September 3rd, which would have been 13 days before the trial occurred. So we were well within our timeline, and in fact, in advance of the deadline provided by the Mississippi Rules of Criminal Procedure. The state provided us their witness list, and also our witness list had 9 people on them. One of those witnesses was going to testify on September 10th only, and the state was aware of that. So we had 8 additional witnesses at that point, which we provided a summary of their testimony, their names, their contact information, which included Dr. Clark as well. With the exception of Dr. Clark, our expert witness, the state had already talked to every single one of those witnesses. They had already been interviewed by law enforcement. The state gave us their witness list on September 9th, which was 7 days prior to the trial and outside the window provided by the Mississippi Rules of Criminal Procedure, but they sure weren't called to the stand to list any one of the 57 witnesses they provided on their list. Also, the judge made a comment about the state had provided us written statements. No, the state didn't. Law enforcement had some written statements from the people they interviewed, and law enforcement had videoed the minor interviews. So what law enforcement gives us and what the DA gives us are two different things. As a defense attorney, or really any attorney, you're not recording interviews with witnesses. Like, that's just insane.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the minor witnesses that we called were witnesses of the states too. So it wasn't like they were unaware of this testimony. The other witnesses were family members in Heath Smiley, one of the victims, who also the state called as well. I think it is a gross violation of Carly's due process rights and our Sixth Amendment right to call witnesses in our own defense to exclude those witnesses. And it's also contrary to Mississippi and U.S. Supreme Court state law, case law. It says you just can't do that. It is a gross violation of her due process rights that affected her ability to put on a defense. Also, any case, and I have pulled every case in Mississippi talking about willful discovery violations in criminal cases, every single case in which they're even discussing whether an attorney has committed a willful discovery violation, it deals with the witness being disclosed the day before trial or during the trial, not 13 days before trial.
Not to mention they had already spoken to all these witnesses and,
Yes.
and they knew what they were going to say. There was no unfair surprise. There was no prejudice. I mean, the prejudice by precluding them was clearly on Carly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the maternal grandmother was, in fact, one of the witnesses they precluded. And that really impaired our ability to talk about the maternal family's mental health issues, which would have shed a lot of light on the situation. And it was a hard blow. And I think it was absolutely contrary to the law.
I know that you're working on a motion for a new trial now, so we'll talk about that at the end. And I'm sure that's part of it.
It is.
But what other witnesses were precluded? So I guess it was the grandma, Ashley's mom, and also I think another relative.
Yes, Ashley's mom and Ashley's brother-in-law, who were both there and on March 22nd when the police came for their second search, and who were aware of family mental health issues and some of Ashley's mental health issues that we weren't allowed to talk about. It was actually the family members all believed that Ashley too had bipolar disorder. But not only did the judge strike two of our witnesses, he limited the scope of the testimony we could get into with all of our other witnesses.
Right. Explain that a little bit to us.
Well, he said that we were bound to the summary statement, which is exactly what the state gave us for each of their 57 witnesses, and somehow said we were trying to seek an unfair advantage at trial by disclosing short summaries of witnesses whom the state had already spoken to or law enforcement had already spoken to, that we provided 13 days in advance of trial, 8 witnesses. And it just floors me. Also, a lot of the testimony that we were talking about were in the documents we produced to the state on August 20th in discovery. So I don't know what was going on with that verdict, but it was absolutely contrary to the case law, and it was absolutely a violation of Carly's rights, and it hampered her ability to put on a defense.
What is some of the stuff that you think that was left out that people should know that
Ashley
might have made a difference in the verdict? Mm-hmm.
That Ashley herself had bipolar disorder, that Ashley herself, who after being placed on Prozac was so suicidal and violent that her mom had to wrestle her to the ground when she was 14 years old to keep her from getting to the gun cabinet in their house.
And that's something the grandma would have testified to.
Yes. That was exactly what we were calling the grandmother to testify to, that she believed that she had observed herself these issues and her daughter were still present all the way up until the time of her death. So, I mean,
Wow.
it would have been very impactful. That was something Heath wanted to talk about, and something else that I wanted to say about Heath is because people talked about a lot, just from what I've seen about his testimony and how monotoned, and this is still early in the grieving phase for this family, and they have really not had a minute to process the loss of their wife and their daughter and their sister, because from the minute it happened, they immediately were A, threatened by law enforcement, B, trying to get their minds around how this could have happened and what was going on, and C, were worried about their granddaughter, who they knew wasn't in very good mental shape
Yeah.
and was being held in solitary confinement, and whom they couldn't even go see.
So that's at least the next, why not waive the right to a speedy trial? That answers that question, but you can take that one.
Because our client was being held in solitary confinement 24 hours a day. And that in of itself, and she was already placed back on the Lexapro by the detention center immediately upon getting there. And that was a fight to get her off of it.
And that is what, in your theory, is caused this break, disassociation, contributed to it.
We're not saying that Lexapro in and of itself causes this. We're saying because Carly's mental health issues were undiagnosed and she was placed on Lexapro instead of first being placed on a mood stabilizer, which would have allowed a drug like Lexapro or any antidepressant to then start working. What it did was sort of what Dr. Clark talked about, is when you don't have the mood stabilizer, you no longer have, brakes on your car anymore. So you're just whipping around. You can steer it, but that's about all you can do.
They had her on the Zoloft initially, right? And then she was
Yes.
they were supposed to, she was supposed to titrate or wean off of it slowly. And there was some testimony that she may have quit cold turkey. And in your opinion, did that have an effect as well?
Yes, I believe it did. And, and I don't blame Carly for that, because I myself am guilty of, and I mean, and how many of us are? How many times has your doctor said, take 2 antibiotics for 10 days.
Right.
And on day 7, you're feeling so good that you're just like, I don't need it anymore. I'll keep it for the next time I'm sick, so I don't have to go back to the doctor. I'll just have it here. I mean, that's something that everybody does. That's human nature. And also, Carly was 14.
Right.
I mean, my God, I have a child that's 13, and half the time, I swear, if I don't remind him to brush his teeth every day, he won't.
Right. A lot of people are wondering why she rejected the 20-year plea deal.
It was a
40-year plea deal.
Because she felt like that was an unfair sentence based on the circumstances. And I agree.
I mean, obviously she's being advised by counsel, and I'm sure that she had family members perhaps guiding her as well. I mean, again, you're trying a 14-year-old as an adult, expecting them to make adult decisions. And it's so backwards, the system.
Well, and the state admitted early on, and we thought that was really going to stand out to people, that there was no motive for this crime. I mean, I don't know how many times I heard the prosecutors say, we don't know why. We'll never know why. Well, yeah, we do know why. It's the medication. But what they were trying to say is, this is a loving family relationship, but we should all just accept that kids get mad at their parents sometimes, so they'll just go home from school when nobody's had a fight and shoot their mom, and it just happens. I mean, that's just not true.
That's what I was struggling with the whole entire time, like the why of it. Like there needed to be so much more to the story that we didn't hear until you started putting on your case, and we got to hear about Carly's childhood and history. So people want to know why you didn't call Kevin Gregg as a witness. Maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah. So I don't think people really, the people that didn't know why we can't call Kevin Gregg probably don't really understand schizophrenia. Ashley had instigated a lawsuit in Warren County in our chancery courts, which we call family law courts here in Mississippi. And one of the things that she was trying to do was to get his visitation entirely terminated. She started that case in November of 2022. And as of March of 2024, she still had not been able to get service of process on him because he does not have a job and is that good at evading service of process. Kevin wasn't talking to us. The state couldn't serve him to talk to him because he thinks we're all government agents trying to get him.
So he
did not come to court one time. I mean, this is his only child that we know of, and he never came to court one single time at any hearing for any day of this trial to support Carly. And that's because he's not showing up anywhere he thinks is a government entity.
When was the last time prior to the killing that he had seen Carly?
Oh gosh, I think when Ashley filed the lawsuit to terminate his visitation in November of 2022, Carly had not seen him for about 6 months before then. Maybe a year, somewhere between 6 months and a year. So it had been a good little amount of time.
So despite the fact that there was evidence of abuse against Ashley when Carly was 4 years old and younger, until Ashley had to escape with Carly and the young 18-month-old baby, or maybe the baby was even younger at the time, in the middle of the night from him.
The baby was younger at the time.
That's what happened, right? They had to escape in the middle of the night from him?
Yes.
Because he had been abusing Ashley, and Ashley was telling Carly about it. So,
well, it wasn't just that. I mean, Carly saw it herself. Carly had talked in her mental health evaluations with several doctors about seeing her mom with the black eye, seeing her mom trying to put makeup on the black eye, seeing bruises on her mom. I think for Ashley, though, the reason why she finally decided to leave was because Kevin had started physically abusing Carly. And so at that point, she was gone.
And none of that evidence could come in.
Well, I think it actually, some of it did come in. I think both doctors had.
Maybe Dr. Clark, right?
I think Clark and Pickett had both mentioned something about Carly being physically abused by her dad, and she was scared of her dad.
They did bring up some of Dr. Pickett, who we can talk about in a second, but he brought up, some tweets of Kevin Gregg's from 2012, where he was touting the use of hallucinogens and saying that LSD is great and mescaline, MDMA, and he was a big proponent of psychedelics. And Carly had told at least one of the doctors that he had a giant medicine cabinet full of all kinds of pills, and that he had bragged to her that one time he took 10 mushroom caps, and apparently that was a lot because he bragged about it. And I'm thinking, God only knows what happened to her when she was over there visiting him. Was he dosing her? Was she?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he would blow marijuana smoke in her face when she was 4, 5, 6 years old. One time he asked her if she wanted to take acid with him when she was 7 or 8. There was another time that Carly spoke with the doctors about, at least 2 of them, that he was so high out of his mind that he could not get off the couch to fix her food or give her water. And she was too little to reach the sink. So Carly just went hungry for 2 days.
There was something else that's horrifying. Something else that they brought up, that she was hiding under the bed because she was so afraid of him, that he would sit in his chair for the entire day and never even speak to her.
He could be very violent too. It was sort of like he would have these sort of sporadic episodes that would come out of nowhere. Everything would be fine, and all of a sudden he would just be yelling at people in a very aggressive, somewhat violent manner. She'd seen him do it to his own parents during some of the visitation periods, and she was so frightened by it, she ran in a bedroom and locked the door and hid under the bed and was trying to call her mom to come get her. And there was actually Dr. Clark had in his report an episode that he spoke about in which Ashley drove from Vicksburg to Starkville, Mississippi, which is several hours, to come pick her up because Carly had called and was so scared, saying, please come pick her up. And I'll tell you how an active drug addict has visitation in Mississippi.
Yeah, please.
And in many states is, unfortunately, all across the country today, we still treat children like property instead of people. And so while courts tout things like the best interest of the child, it always comes down to, well, a parent has a constitutional right to visitation, and it's the highest right a parent can have, and we can't just take it away. People are more concerned about denying a parent time with a child than they are about a child's physical and emotional safety. And that's one thing we have to change, is we have to start treating children as individual human beings who are entitled to their own set of rights, the most important of which is the right to be safe, the right to be protected, and stop treating them as possessions of their parents.
Amen. Preach, sis. The cutting was a big, red flag for me. Like, this child was in obvious pain, and, there was a lot of impulse control issues and Pickett just kind of like glossed over that. Like, he really did not address it. And everyone, from the other side of, lock Carly up forever, she deserves it, is, Pickett was so great. His testimony was so great. And I'm watching him and I thought he was good at explaining. And then when your friend Kevin, your co-counsel, got up and started cross-examining him about how many times he had actually treated children or adolescents, I mean, it was very clear that this was like the first or second time he had ever testified in a case, and had never
This
even.
was the first time he had ever testified in a criminal case. It is the first time he had ever evaluated a child. It is the first time he had ever been tendered as an expert in forensic psychiatry. He has never treated children before, period, let alone evaluated them. And yeah, Dr. Pickett was not a huge fan of mine, and he was not a huge fan of Carly's. But I mean, it's like he already made his mind up about Carly before he ever started talking to her, or before he ever met her. And one thing that really stood out to us, and I hope it stood out to other people, is that Dr. Pickett and Dr. Giuliano both work for the state. Carly was seen by Dr. Clark, Dr. Giuliano, and Dr. Pickett and she had 2 counselors. So out of these 5 people, 4 people are coming to very similar conclusions. And Dr. Pickett's the only one that's kind of out there. And he's the one that has the least amount of experience with children, the least amount of time with Carly, the least amount of time practicing medicine, practicing psychiatry, the least amount of time to ever be in court testifying. Who writes an 84-page forensic evaluation?
Nobody. Because it's that much more fodder for cross-examination.
Well, and the other thing is the word choices he used. A professional would never use words like diabolical. I mean, that's just entirely uncalled for, unprofessional. But on cross-examination, he made a point of, I stand by it. Well, I stand by the fact you've never been around a 14-year-old girl. And just the tone that he would even, it's just so unprofessional, and it's not what people who know what they're doing do. When he was talking about some of her journal entries or reading them, he was imparting a tone and context in Carly's journals that he absolutely could not have known that was how she was writing it. But you really saw its bias in that. And
it's like he was reading off a script. He was performing.
Oh, he was. And the fact that, he put so much stock in, a little quote that Carly had written down in her journal, something about innocence is the last illusion, which was a quote from a video game. But even after, and he was embarrassed to find that out. His face got very red. He kind of bowed up a little bit. But even after that, he didn't back off. He didn't say, well, I do have to change my mind. I didn't realize that sort of changes my thought process there. But one of the reasons that Dr. Pickett's report was so long is that I think something like the last 30 pages was just him watching the indoor video camera from March 19th and describing minute by minute what each person and animal in the video was feeling.
Talk about what the dogs were feeling?
Yeah, he was telling us what the dogs were feeling, which I mean, I didn't know that he had also practiced dog psychiatry.
Wow.
I mean, I've just never in my life seen any written evaluation have anything like that in there.
Was
It was
any of this objectionable? People are
oh,
saying, why didn't you object? Why didn't you
all of
object?
it, all of it. Well, he didn't testify about it, so we didn't have to object, and
Mhm.
his report didn't come into evidence because the judge wouldn't let it into evidence.
Right.
And they knew they couldn't get it into evidence, which is one reason why they really fought us on getting Dr. Clark's report into evidence, is because Dr. Pickett's report was really a lot of third-party hearsay
Yeah.
and
Right.
speculation.
And he just was able to just like narrate. I mean, it was just one big long monologue.
Oh yeah.
But because they were his opinions, he was allowed to say them. And then they
Oh
were
yeah.
fodder for cross-examination. But had you even objected to it, he still would have been allowed to say his opinions. But it's a good thing the jury wasn't able to see that report, because God knows, like you said, what else was in those 85 pages?
Yeah. Well, we objected to him being tendered. We objected to him being tendered. I think that was at a separate hearing. But the judge had already made very clear, I think on September 10th, that his report was not coming into evidence because he was using Ashley's visitation journal, like a visitation log she kept all the way back from 2012. And he was like, you're using a written, and I think we had called it a journal, but it was a visitation log. And that's what you're getting a lot of this information from. Like, no, we're not putting that into evidence.
Right. That would not be admissible on its own. So why can you use that to render your opinion? Other questions I had were things like, why didn't the defense call Carly's two medical providers that state called in rebuttal in your case in chief?
Well, the reason is that we had reached out to them multiple times. They lawyered up very quickly because they were afraid of being sued. And I'm actually friends with Rebecca Kirk's attorney. And, you know, they fought me on the production of some documents. And I thought it was actually interesting, even though I'd had Carly sign a HIPAA waiver and an authorized consent to turn those medical records over to me. The medical community basically said, look, the court can certify her as an adult all day long. We have real ethical questions and legal questions about whether a 14-year-old has the agency to sign a HIPAA waiver for herself, because as you know, most of the time you have to have a parent, if you're under the age of 18, sign a HIPAA waiver to get a child's documents, or the guardian of that parent. But Carly didn't have a guardian.
Wow. So they would not even turn over her medical records to you.
They did eventually. I mean, we fought on it, and they did. And then the state subpoenaed. But that was a big issue. And it was an issue we brought up to the judge. Another thing is that I don't know how many times I emailed and called Rebecca Kirk's attorney saying, look, I'll come to your office and you can sit there the whole time while I speak with Rebecca Kirk. I just want to ask her some questions about her records, about her treatment of Carly. They would not do it. And 101 of being an attorney is you don't put somebody on the stand if you don't know what they're going to say.
That's right. So if they wouldn't talk to you and you had no idea what they were going to say, let the state call them and then you can cross-examine them.
That's right. That's right.
What's so interesting is that in New York, I know that when your child turns 14 here, as a parent, you no longer have access to their medical records.
Oh, really?
Because I remember when my kids turned 14, I was sent a notice by the pediatrician's office, like, you no longer have access to their records, in the portal or whatever. So it's so interesting how it goes, state to state. Like it's crazy.
It's 18 here in Mississippi.
18.
And also, in Mississippi, it would be now for counseling, that's a little something different. But just at a regular general practitioner doctor's appointment, your kid's not going in there by themselves. I mean, first of all, Carly didn't drive herself. She couldn't drive. She didn't have a driver's license or driver's permit. So her mom's taking her to these appointments. Her mom's not sitting outside in the waiting room while she goes in to talk to a doctor about her issues. She's sitting there in the room with her. And I think that's even what Olivia Lieber testified to, that every single time she saw Carly, which was once in person and then 2 telehealth visits, Ashley was present for both. I think you really start to see some difficulties if you're genuinely, your mom's worried about you turning into your dad and having the same issues your dad had. You're experiencing these issues, but are you going to say that in front of your mom?
Of course not.
No.
And all of the experts testified that your opinion or your diagnosis is only as good as the information that you're given, especially a psychiatric one or a psychological one, by the patient. If they're not
Absolutely.
telling you the truth, how can you diagnose, or how can you even really treat?
And it's also really difficult, and I want to be fair to every medical provider here. It is exceedingly difficult to diagnose teenagers for many reasons. One, there are a lot of hormones going on. Two, they're still developing. Three, anything can happen. Their personalities are still developing. I think teenagers in and of themselves, just because of their age, and especially teenage girls, of course, they're dramatic. Your first crush, it's like everything's Romeo and Juliet. You have a bad day at school, but everything's the worst. Your life is over. You'll never recover from this. Your friend moves away and you're devastated and you'll never have another great day. I mean, that's just a part of being a kid and growing up.
Yeah. Let's try her as an adult and throw her away and lock her away. Throw her in and lock her up and throw away the key, but let's not let her be able to authorize that her medical records can be disclosed to her attorney.
Yeah.
Like, it's so backwards, and it's just so.
Well, and also too, I would love to know how a 15 or 14-year-old gets tried by a jury of their peers.
Yes.
Because in Mississippi, you have to be 21 to sit on a jury, even though you register to vote at 18. And as you know, we get our jury pool from the people who are registering to vote. So I think it's really interesting that we're saying you can register to vote at 18, but before we let you make a decision about somebody's life, you need to have a little more maturity. You need to have a little more
21?
maturity. You need to be at least 21 years old. So, but then we can say, but we're going to try you as an adult, because it doesn't really matter how mature we thought you were at the time of the offense or how mature you even are now during the trial of this matter. You're fine.
In New York, it's 18. I find that's crazy that it's 21 to serve on a jury. She never would get a jury of her peers. And I know that you made a motion to transfer it to juvenile court, which Judge Arthur denied.
Did.
You want to talk about that for a sec?
Yes. We really thought that Carly should have been in a juvenile detention center where she could have she wouldn't have been in solitary confinement at all. She could have been getting schoolwork to continue her education and also to help just stabilize her. Because I don't know if anybody's ever had the experience of, having cabin fever. I know we all remember COVID pretty vividly.
Oh, yeah.
But at that point, you still had your whole house or apartment to walk around in.
Mm-hmm.
And people found it really difficult and noticed like they were experiencing depression. A lot of people filed for divorce after COVID.
Uh-huh.
Or in the wake of COVID. People thought that was really difficult. Well, imagine being all by yourself in a very small room all day long for 6 months. It's inhumane. You can't keep.
It's cruel and unusual.
Yeah, you cannot keep an adult who's actually been convicted of a crime in solitary confinement that long.
I don't know if you're following this case out of Delphi, but there's he hasn't been tried or convicted, and he's been held in prison, not in a jail. Solitary confinement, same thing. Richard Allen, it's insane. And that's been the argument all along. Transfer him to a jail. He does not belong in a prison. He hasn't been convicted. You have him in solitary for what you say is his own safety. And the decline in this man since he went in, you can just see, is obvious in his mental state.
People don't know that pretrial detention cannot, and bond cannot be used to punish. Like, that's not its purpose. The purpose is she is still in solitary confinement now. The purpose of bond is to, decide, like, is this person a flight risk? Well, Carly wasn't. She doesn't have a car. She doesn't have a driver's license. She doesn't have a permit. Is this person still a danger to herself? No. And you know how we know? Because the people at Region 8 in the detention center who evaluated told us that. Is she a danger to anyone else? No. And again, there were less restrictive ways that Carly could have been monitored without being held in solitary confinement.
That's, Debbie says treating this poor child like an animal. That's what's wrong with society. Won't face the mental health crisis in our country.
Agreed. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, I think our country's doing a pretty good job now of providing drug courts for people. I just wish we also did as good of a job as providing mental health courts. I don't know how it is in New York. In Mississippi, we don't have mental health courts. And I mean, and it's, I think, a travesty.
I've been very vocal about the fact that what happened during the lockdowns in 2020 to our children and our youth and our middle schoolers, like, I think the mental effects are things that are never going to be undone. I mean, here, our kids were locked up for like 2 years during their formative years. Schools basically abandoned them. There was sometimes online school, sometimes not. There was zero mental health, even Zooms. I called the district. I said, "Can you just come on with the kids and just let them talk? Just have like a group session where you could just mindfulness, breathing, something these kids don't understand what's happening, and they are terrified and they are being dropped." And imagine like the parents who are first responders that had to go to work and they're leaving 3 kids at home. And now their 12-year-old is in charge of making sure that the 6-year-old gets on Zoom and does the Zoom school. The burden, the emotional and mental burden that we put on these children, we're just now seeing like these ripple effects of what we did to them. And I'm so heartbroken by it. And I think that has a lot to do with this, what we're seeing now, because I mean, look, this happened in 2024. Carly was 40. She would have been 10. I don't know what happened in Mississippi during the lockdowns, but
He was locked down.
yeah.
Schools were shut down.
And she's an only child, I mean, it was hard as a mom. It was really hard. I had 3 kids in middle school. It was really hard. I don't know what the answer is, but the video, a lot of people are saying that that is what convicted her. Let's talk about the video, because I say if she was so diabolical, like people are like, she's this diabolical mastermind, and they keep parroting it in the chat. So diabolical mastermind. If Carly Gregg, who skipped a grade, who's by all accounts, and you can tell us because you spent more time with her than anyone, highly intelligent, if she's such a diabolical mastermind and she knows where that camera is, why didn't she get rid of the camera before she went into her mom's room, by the way, and got a loaded gun, which I have other problems with, and did this crime? Why wouldn't she have gotten rid of the camera if she was such a diabolical?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's one of the things that we really tried to hit on, is that, first of all, there are a lot of people who aren't very smart who commit crimes, who one of the first things they do is they put tape over a camera, they take a camera down, they cut the power. It would have been very easy for Carly to bring that camera down and bring it down in a way in which it wouldn't have looked like she was the one that brought it down, and then gone about doing, a crime that she had planned out to do. Even after she commits the crime, she's still not going back and taking the camera down, even though it was on a shelf in the kitchen. I mean, it was very visible. It just doesn't make sense, especially if Carly has any incentive to hide what she's doing or is aware of what she's doing. Another thing that I don't think people really understood is the smart thing to do would have been, okay, I just shot my mom. I'm pulling this camera down, I'm getting in my mom's car, and I'm taking off. Or I'm taking this camera and I'm going to go smash it to pieces and take a pair of scissors and, chop up the SD card inside. I mean, that's what a diabolical genius would have done, right? That's destroying and tampering with evidence. She didn't tamper with evidence by putting it in the fridge in her house, intact with the SD card still in place. I mean, that's just ridiculous. If Carly had intended this, she would have just cut it up.
And then people say, why did she hide the gun behind her back if she didn't know what she was doing?
Why would she not just carry the gun around if she didn't care what she was doing?
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's just a strange behavior. That's something odd about that. Why did she sing to the dogs afterwards? I think those are things I don't know how to answer because they don't make sense. But what it does tell me is that's not somebody who's planning to do anything. Because again, even if Carly was like, I'm going to go do this and then I'm going to take the camera down, why would she care whether the camera saw her with the gun or not?
Right. Yeah. And also, Dr. Pickett, go back to Dr. Pickett for a second. He said, I could tell as he's dissecting the video that there's no way that she was disassociating because, typically when someone disassociates, they scream and yell and it's very obvious and they can't, they wouldn't be able to send a text message without spelling errors. And they have all this disorganized thought. And I'm listening to that testimony as somebody and I'm saying, well, maybe the way that she behaved so calmly is even more indicative of dissociation.
I would
And
agree.
I think that what say you?
No, I would agree. I don't know if Dr. Pickett's ever seen anybody in a dissociative state. But let's take a minute and let's talk about a mild dissociative state, something like shock.
Mm-hmm.
And people have different responses to shock. It's fight, flight, or flight. And I just know me personally, when, something puts me in a state of shock, I freeze. It takes me a minute. I'm just sort of like, you're not seeing any reaction out of me. And I suppose if I was being, at the time that I was in a state of shock or a mild dissociative state like that, people might pick me apart and say, oh, what an unemotional, heartless, callous person she is. When in reality, I'm just processing in my mind 1,000 different emotions and trying to sort of make sense of it, but you're not going to see that on my face. Second of all, Dr. Pickett admitted he has no experience treating children psychiatrically or in any other way. So how would he know? Dr. Clark has treated children who have had schizophrenia, who have had bipolar 2 disorder, who have experienced traumas and acute stress, which has put them into a dissociative state. And he found that Carly's actions were, similar to something a person who is in a dissociative state. You can dissociate and still function. And another mild example of dissociation, or what people call zoning out, which I think is the mildest form of dissociation, is something that I think we've all been guilty of, which is, you leave work after a long day, you're you're doing a million things in your mind. And all of a sudden you find yourself sitting in your driveway and you're like, I don't even remember.
How did I get
here? Yeah. Like, I don't even remember I came with a mirror. Or, several years ago, my law office moved to a different building. And I'm just here to tell you, when I was driving into work in the morning, if I happened to be on the phone with a client or another attorney or a guardian ad litem, I was pulling into my old office space before I realized it. And then I'd be like, and then as soon as I got in the parking lot, I'd be like, oh my God, why'd I do this? And have to turn back out. I mean, you can still drive a car and function and send a text message being in a dissociative state. I mean, it doesn't mean that you are, dissociating is not the same thing as, being comatose.
Yeah. And I think that Dr. Clark had the requisite credentials. He's like triple board certified in adolescent and child psychiatry. I mean, his credentials were impeccable. He's a Harvard doctor.
He was teaching psychiatry at Harvard for 10 years.
I don't know what I mean, I guess it was the video. Let's take some questions while we're here. Kirsten, thank you for the 10. Thanks for having Attorney Todd here today. Thank you, Attorney Todd, for being here today. We're looking forward to your opinions in this case. Thank you, Kirsten. Fairy Raven, thank you for your 5. Attorney Todd reminds me of the beautiful actress Mary Elizabeth Mastro Antonio. Do you know who that is?
I do not, but that's very sweet. Thank you.
I was calling you a young Priscilla Presley, which sort of stuck because you're so strikingly beautiful. Donnie Not Wahlberg, thanks for the 10, says thank you and thank you. Thank you. Elf, who decided that Carly was tried as an adult? We talked about that. That's the Mississippi law.
That's
statute. Why wasn't she housed in a youth detention center until trial?
Because when you're charged as an adult, you're housed in an adult facility.
So there was no way to get her out except for that motion, which court denied.
We tried.
New Hampshire one, thanks for the 5, says, Attorney Todd, please tell Carly there are many of us who are keeping Carly in our thoughts and are hopeful that she gets the proper help that she needs.
Thank you.
Will she get the proper help that she needs in an adult prison?
No. And there are a few things that I wanted to make sure everybody understands. I don't know how it is in other states, but in Mississippi, life is life. Life is not 25 years. Life is not, well, she'll have a hearing when she turns 24. No, life is the rest of her life. And Mississippi prisons are not equipped to treat people with mental health issues. Now, they can treat you if you have a dental issue, or if you need dialysis, or if you need stitches. You have medical care, but you don't have psychological or psychiatric care. And Carly is going into an adult general population jail.
They're going to put her in Gen Pop right now, like before she even turns 18?
Yes. When she is transferred to an adult detention, an adult prison, I think the first week they keep them under suicide watch, and that's for everybody that's convicted of a crime and sent to jail. The first week you're monitored in suicide watch, and then after that you're put into general population regardless of age. There's no.
Will she be allowed visitors
as an adult?
When is that scheduled to happen? And will she be allowed to have visitors then? And where will that be? Is it going to be really far away from where her family lives?
We don't know as of right now. The Mississippi Department of Corrections will be the one who decide where to place Carly. We know she's not being moved this week. We think it'll be sometime next week. But again, that's a call for the Mississippi Department of Corrections, and that's not information that they give out to us. She should be able to have visitation just like anybody else. I think there's certain days or certain times, but I think that that's some consolation to Carly, is that she won't have to be alone by herself all day long anymore. But just for me, as someone who knows Carly and as a mom myself, I just, I don't think I ate a meal all weekend, just thinking about it.
So many people here listening in the chat also feel the same way and have sent me emails, and they're really afraid for her safety when she goes into a woman's prison and is just,
she's 12 years old,
thrown to the wolves, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Marta, thank you for the 5. The U.S. considers itself such a beacon of law, but per international law, solitary confinement lasting more than 15 days in a row is considered torture.
I know.
D, thanks for the 20. Even with what was presented, I believe Carly didn't understand right from wrong that day. This case is heartbreaking. She doesn't deserve life in prison. I feel she won't get the help she needs in prison. I pray for Carly.
Yeah.
Thank you, D.
And, and one of the things that I want to say to the people that are saying she did the crime, she should do the time. She did the crime, she should do the time, put her in prison and throw away the key. Who does that benefit? Because all that happens there is that taxpayers are paying a lot of money to house her for the rest of her life, which will be a very long time. It's not what the family wanted, who actually knew Ashley Smiley. It's not what the family who knew Ashley Smiley says Ashley would have wanted. It's not what Heath, who was a victim here too, it's not what Heath wanted. So who's winning here?
The state gets a conviction. And that's what I say all the time. Like, do they want justice or do they want a conviction?
Well, even, and people are quick to forget that what prisons are built for is not punishment, but rehabilitation. So, there's a punishment avenue, but also inside the theory of justice is mercy and grace and the idea of a fair trial. Where was that for Carly?
Well, hopefully you can write that with your motion for a new trial.
It's in there. It's in there.
Howie Brown, thank you for gifting 5 memberships. That is so very sweet of you. People want to know, Cheyenne, thank you for the 5. Does Carly truly understand what life means? When we saw the verdict being read, she generally looked like she had no idea what was happening. Tell us, does she understand? Was she prepped? People are saying, well, she didn't show any emotion. She's not showing any remorse. Maybe you could speak to that for a second.
Yes.
I'm going to give you full screen. I will be right back.
Well, first of all, the first 2 months that I met with Carly, and I was meeting with her every day, all Carly did was cry. It took probably my first 12 visits with her before I could even get her to look up at me and not just look at the floor. She wasn't eating. She was on suicide watch. She wasn't sleeping. She was medicated. I think putting her, I cannot tell you how many times I've gone to see Carly after a pretrial hearing, and she has absolutely bawled her eyes out, sat in a chair with her, hugging her knees to her chest, just telling me over and over again, I just really want my mom. I just really want my mom. I really miss her. And, and all you can do in that moment is say, I know you do, Carly. I know. And, and it's heartbreaking. But for people to say that she hasn't grieved her mom, they just don't know what they're talking about. They haven't seen it. For people to say that Carly was not emotional, I never showed Carly the video footage from that day because she was being held in solitary confinement and she was highly medicated. And I just didn't think that she could handle it. So when it was played that Monday, that was the first time she had ever seen it. And I don't know how many people were watching her reaction on Monday, but she bawled her eyes out. And it is emotionally exhausting. And I don't know how many people have ever gone into litigation, whether personal, like a divorce, or criminal. But, while you're under the umbrella of litigation, it is stressful. It is draining. Every emotion is played up. And by the time you get to trial, you're sort of just in this very surreal, disassociative like state. You're separating yourself to try to be present. Also, the week before the trial, they increased Carly's dosage of Abilify to now she is on the highest dose of Abilify. So I think being on that mood stabilizer contributed to some of the affect that she had. And also Carly was very nervous. She was nervous. She was scared. And one of the things that I had her do was I told her, take notes. We gave her a pen and a pencil and a legal pad. And I said, take notes or draw if you feel like you need to draw, if you start to feel overwhelmed. And so that's a lot of what Carly would do. And I know some people were upset that Carly was able to drink a Coke. Well, when you're in jail, all you get is water.
Really?
Yeah, really. You get water. That's it. Carly had never been allowed to drink any carbonated drink prior to going into the detention center. And she asked me, and one day she didn't really ask me, but one day I was just loading my bag up for court and I needed some caffeine because I was exhausted. So I put in, one of the Cokes I had in my fridge, for the kids, and I brought it to her, and it really was so meaningful to her. She was so appreciative of that. And if I can do one little thing for my client, I'm going to do it. And I don't care who likes it or who doesn't like it, because I don't represent y'all. I represent her. And if I could have brought her 4 Cokes, I would have brought her 4 Cokes.
People also in this comment is the way she cried on your shoulder. And I just pulled a screen grab because, this was heartbreaking, the way you tried to comfort her. It was so clear how much you cared about her and what a great connection you had with her. And you were the only one fighting for her. Again, where's the footage of Carly grabbing the camera to put it in the fridge?
Yeah.
It doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
Right? Is that right?
It doesn't exist, no.
Right. So again.
And again, it just doesn't make sense. Like, why would this diabolical, evil genius not destroy the SD card and smash the camera? Why put it in the fridge? That doesn't track. That tracks more with somebody who's not in their right mind. Why wouldn't have Carly taken the camera with her when she ran and smashed it and threw it somewhere?
In the drain ditch or the drain pipe or
anything like that. That's just not the action of somebody who had any type of plan or was even making cognitive choices.
Pretzels and Cornbread says, I felt you had a connection with Carly, Ms. Todd, as your compassion for her situation was obvious. Will you be able to stay in touch with her?
Yes, I'm still her attorney. So I'm still representing her in the appeal and in our motion for new trial. And I'm actually going to go see her later today at the detention center.
Wow. Does she have access to any sort of device like television or the internet or no?
Mm-mm.
So she can't even see this show and how you're advocating for her.
No. But I will say this, and I will say this. I really take I really take issue with people who want to make negative comments about Carly, or to try to send negative comments to her Instagram account, which we are trying to take down, because she's a kid. She's in jail. She doesn't have access to the internet, and you're a grown adult. So if there's anything negative you feel like you need to say, you're more than welcome to say it to me, because I'm very capable of saying something right back to you. And don't think I won't, because that was my therapy this weekend. Was I would read I just couldn't seem to help it if I would read a few court TV or other quotes. I commented back.
Good for you. You're like me. I just can't control myself.
And I was like
the mama bear comes out, and it's
yes,
forget it. You want to come for me? Come for me.
Yeah.
But we were horrified. Thank you, Mama She. I just want to thank you, Mama She, so much for the 20 and for thanking us, and prayers up for Carly. Everyone in the chat, prayers up for Carly. Karaoke, I was horrified when the prosecutor waved that gun around, started pointing the gun. It looked like she was pointing it at the jury. I'm like, what? And didn't we just watch the Alec Baldwin trial? Like, what are we doing here? Yeah. What do you think of her pointing the gun?
It really surprised me and it startled me. I think I am probably a bad Southerner in a sense, in that I'm not a gun person. I don't own a gun. You know, I grew up with brothers. I grew up with brothers and a dad, and they were big hunters. And I don't take issue with people owning guns. I just don't. And I don't really like guns. And so it was upsetting for me. I was startled by that and really bothered by it.
Yeah, I can't believe she wasn't admonished. I was surprised by that. Sarah, thank you so much, Sarah. And shock and horror. Delicate question. Is she on any type of suicide watch right now? And if so, do you know how long that would last?
She's not on suicide watch right now. She was when she was first brought into the Rankin County Detention Center. But because she's not made any attempt at self-harm, she hasn't been on one since her first week or so at the detention center. She will be on suicide watch when she is transferred to the adult jail prison, which right now we're expecting to be sometime next week.
Thank you. Laura, thanks. Says, I can see why Carly's family supports her so much. Thank you. Spiritual Mind says maybe contacting Amnesty International concerning this case, or another organization fighting for human rights.
We've reached out to the Innocence Project and the ACLU, so we're hoping that they will also get involved. But again, I mean, we know we're just one case, and they have so many, so we're not really sure where we fall on their list.
That's why we're here trying to shine a light on this. Susan, is there any way someone could work with her remotely on trauma? Trauma is what I do.
No.
Nope.
No. You have rights in jail. In prison, like no, you don't get those things in prison.
AJ, thanks for the 5. I've worked prison ministry since 2007. Can we send her any puzzle books, reading books, things to help support this part of her journey? Can we send care packages? Thanks, Jenny.
Yes, but it has to be. It's my understanding from the MDOC rules that it has to be after Carly is transferred to the prison next week, and it has to be sent directly from the carrier, like Amazon. And that's actually the only thing really Carly could have that we've all tried to keep her in supply of were books. She actually read War and Peace while she was in the detention center. She never read Crime and Punishment. I would like to clarify that.
Yes, that was a huge thing. She read Crime and Punishment. She wanted to read it, but she didn't read it, right?
She never read it, no. She never read it, but she is a voracious reader. That's actually been one of the hardest things was keeping Carly in books. But it was a good experience though, because I tried to. She likes the classics and she's read a lot, but I always tried to be thoughtful of when I was picking out books for her, things that would be positive, or something that would help you like escape a little bit, get out of your own situation and into the world of the book. And she really seemed to like those. And so, but then, I realized that, the detention center doesn't just have Carly, it has other people. So I started making it a habit to, whenever I would get a book for Carly, I would get an additional copy and donate it to the detention center. And that's something that I would encourage everybody to do would be to donate books to the detention center, because they're filled with Bibles, which are great, and they should be there. I'm not downing, religious books, but I think everyone could benefit from literature and good books.
And you told me you sent her or you brought her a book recently, and then she drew you a picture. If you want me to show it.
Yeah. She that was actually back in April. I asked Carly if I could bring her any books, and she told me that she'd always wanted to read A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And I told her, I was like, oh, Dickens is so wordy. And I was like, but I'll bring it to you. And so I brought her the book, and she really liked it. And I also brought her a sketch pad. And a few weeks later, when I went back to visit her, she brought me a portrait of Charles Dickens that she had drawn for me.
There it is. I put it up on the screen.
Yeah, as a thank you.
Tell us about Carly. What are some things that you want everyone to know about Carly from your relationship with her, from your conversations with her? What do you want us to know?
Carly is one of the sweetest, kindest, most thoughtful, caring kids I've ever known. She is so smart. She's probably the most talented person I've ever known. She loves music. She made her own ukulele, like out of wood. She made it herself. She plays the ukulele, the mandolin, the piano, the guitar. She is someone who is always very nurturing. She's trying to take care of other people all the time. She really felt like she needed to take care of her mom, because she knew about how much her mom had been through, and the effect and the toll that losing a child and having to deal with her, biological dad had taken on her. And so Carly was really a kid that always tried to take care of her mom. And you could see that a lot, and I could see it a lot even with me. Carly would be trying to take care of me, or very mindful of my emotions at times, which is something that Dr. Pickett noticed but didn't like, and thought that I was somehow manipulative, or Carly was somehow being cued. And I thought it was very odd, because none of the other doctors had any issue with it. So I think that was one thing he
with
really
you being in the room for the exam.
Well, no. Well, first of all,
that's common. First of all, I told everyone that. I'm like, I always go with my client to an IME. Always.
Yeah, I think it's a poor attorney who doesn't.
Right.
Regardless, but especially when you're dealing with a minor. I mean, could you imagine law enforcement can't interview minors without parents present? At least they're not supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course I was going to go, and these were long days, but, Carly was so used to being, trying to take care of her mom and she saw me as a mother figure, that Carly was trying to take care of my emotions half the time.
Oh, wow.
So I remember I had a nervous habit of biting my nails, and I've had it ever since I was a kid. And there was a time, and I'll find myself doing it and not realize it. And I was thinking about something else, while Carly was, answering a question of Dr. Pickett's. And the next thing I knew, Carly was, had looked over at me and was like, really shocked and upset. And she said, "Did I say something wrong?" And I was like, "No, why?" And she was like, "You're biting your nails. Did I say something?" I was like, "No, Carly, you're fine." I was like, "It's just a nervous habit." And another thing that I want people to know about Carly is, while we were sitting there waiting for the jury to come back in the room to give us the verdict, and Carly was feeling very emotional, she looked over at me and she said, "I just want to thank you for everything you've done for me, no matter what they say, what they come back with." And that's the kind of kid Carly is.
It's heartbreaking. I'm getting a lot of comments in here like, yes, tell us why she did it. Why did she do it? Tell us the why. She killed her mother. Why?
There is no why. That's what a mental break that's what happens when someone has a mental break, is sometimes they do things violently that they had no intention of doing at the time. Hell, the state wishes they could tell you why. That ought to stand out to you, that the state didn't have a motive, because one didn't exist.
Like Dr. Pickett said, once you have a diagnosis, then you get the golden ticket to get in there and then prove the two-pronged Monotone test.
Tell me why some people Some people can take Lexapro as minors and not have any issues, and other people take Lexapro and become suicidal. Hell, if I could tell you that, I wouldn't be a lawyer.
Tell us how often this insanity defense, the Monotone test, is used in Mississippi.
It's very rare. I really think Mississippi needs to redefine. I think in other states, people have temporary insanity as a defense. In Mississippi, our version of that is the McNaughton standard, and they're very rare because it's a very hard defense. Kevin had been practicing law for 30 years, criminal law exclusively for 30 years. This was his second McNaughton case. The other attorneys in the room, both the prosecutors and myself, it was all of our first McNaughton case. So it's very rare.
And it's a very, very difficult standard to meet. It's hard. It's not, if it was easy, I guess everybody would claim it.
Yeah.
Why were no mitigating factors presented at sentencing?
If the jury, every mitigating factor had already been presented in the trial of this matter. So if it didn't impact them at trial, it wasn't going to impact them at sentencing. The family was too emotional to testify. Kevin was emotional in his testimony. I couldn't get up there and speak because I told him I'd go to jail for 30 days. But just because I would have been so emotional,
right.
I would not have been able to not cry, and Judge Arthur would have put me in jail for 30 days for having an emotional response.
Really?
Yes. I mean, that's one of the things that he said in the courtroom. I do not want any emotional response. If anyone has an emotional response to the jury verdict, you're going to jail for 30 days. I could not have spoken in that moment without just crying, and then I would have gone to jail for 30 days.
Yes.
And I couldn't have, and I really wouldn't have cared about that at that point, but I just wouldn't have been able to speak, to really say anything to the jury. So Kevin did. Kevin spoke on sentencing, and even Kevin was emotional because he has a 14-year-old daughter at home.
He did start crying. He said, "This is the hardest thing that I've ever done." It was,
and it was interesting because all of the, when after we did our closings and we sort of broke, every attorney I know, and Kevin was getting the same thing, all the attorneys he knew were all texting us saying, "You're fixing to get a hung jury. You're fixing to get a hung jury. You're fixing to get a hung jury." And that was the general feeling of the courtroom, when we left, was we were fixing to get a hung jury. And I expected the jury to be out for a long time. And I think the night before I'd maybe slept a total of maybe 2 hours. And, as soon as you get done with closing statements in a trial, as I'm sure you know, like you just sort of, the adrenaline crashes. And so then the exhaustion just sets in, and we were sitting in the courtroom, and I remember looking over at Kevin and said, "I can stay here in this state until about 2:00. But once it hits 2:00, I'm going home and going to sleep, but I'll leave my front door unlocked. If the jury comes back, just somebody come in my house and shake me. I've got to go to sleep." I mean, we thought they were going to be out for quite
days. I thought it was going to be days. I went outside.
7 or 8.
I came back in and I see there's a verdict. I went on live immediately. I couldn't believe it. Less than 2 hours. It was 12 people. I mean,
yeah. I mean, and I don't want to disparage the jury. It's a hard job, and they'd been away. They've been here all day, and they didn't really ask to do this. We picked them and sort of made them and put them in this decision. But I would just hope that if I were ever in a situation in which I was being asked to make a decision about the rest of somebody's life, it would take me more than 2 hours to make up my mind.
Dewey K. Arthur kept reminding everyone, Honorable Dewey K. Arthur kept reminding everyone they were only getting paid $25 a day. There was one point, I think I rewound it 3 times, where he slammed the gavel down. He said, "We're going to have a pregnant pause." And nobody knew what pregnant pause meant. I of course, didn't know what it was, but a lot of people had never heard that expression. He slammed his gavel down and he stormed off, and the court officers were kind of watching like, uh-oh, Dewey's not having any of it. So he did really care about the jury and their time. And I felt that he cared about Carly too. In my own way, I felt that even pre-trial, that he really wanted to get her out of there. And I think that my impression was that he was very surprised by the verdict.
I felt that way too. I thought he was very surprised. And let me say this, dislike Judge Arthur. I don't dislike him at all.
We could use him up here in Dedham, Massachusetts. Can you teleport him over here?
Yeah, I'm sure we could send him to make the rounds. The only thing that I really disagreed with, I mean, outside of pretrial motions, the only thing that I really disagreed with Judge Arthur was when he said it's not against the law to use a minor's name. In Mississippi, yes, it is. Yes. We have a statute in which it is illegal to use a minor's name in testimony, but his own order said that you can't use the minor's names. So I disagreed with him there. I mean, I'm sure not that he cares.
Yes, because I remember the parents were texting you of the minors, and it was the prosecutor and the judge who both were using their full names.
Yeah.
During, let's talk about the honey and salt. I'm going to come back to this. Thank you for the 50. We're going to get to, that's the last thing we're going to talk about is what we can do to help going forward with Carly and her case. But let's talk about the Brady violation. False alarm, because I was so excited and I was like, if this is a Brady violation, this is huge. He's going to have to dismiss the case. Tell everyone why that happened.
Yes. So why that happened is when we were sitting in court that day, BG, one of Carly's best friends, sent me a text that said, "Hey, Miss Bridget, I'm so sorry that I didn't realize this beforehand, but I was just thinking about some stuff last night and I was scrolling back through my text messages with Carly. And I found this text message from November of 2023 in which she was telling me about how she had completely blanked out for that entire day. She didn't remember anything that had happened that day. And it was like, she was really bothered by it. And I just found this message. I completely had forgotten about it. And I was like, oh my God, we never got this from the prosecutor. And in this case, we had over 10,000 pages of discovery. The first time discovery was produced by the state was on 5 p.m. on June 4th. And then even after that, we continue to continuously get additional discovery dropped on us. The week before this case went to trial, we had numerous documents from the state dropped on us as we're in the middle of trial prep. And also what they had done is they had downloaded everything off the kids' phones. And that was like 5 or 6 different kids. And as you know, kids live on their phone. So the contents of that alone, but also the way that it's kept in the computer, the way it's stored is it's not chronological. So, I mean, it's just all over the place. And we did word searches in there, but I think the word in particular was zone, instead of zoned, zone, did you zone out instead of zoned with the D?
Oh.
And so it didn't track. And so I was like, oh my God, I was like, Kevin, they didn't turn it over. And he was like, well, we got to do it. And so we did it. And I'll be honest, I have no regrets. Again, I represent my client. As we all saw with Alec Baldwin's trial, this happens a lot.
Yeah.
Intentionally or unintentionally. Now, I never thought that the prosecutors had intentionally not turned something over. It wouldn't have been theirs to turn over because they're not downloading the phones to begin with. That's law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I don't trust law enforcement to do these things and to do them properly. So at that point, we're going with the information that we had. And no, it wasn't that we hadn't looked through discovery. We had combed discovery. But no, I don't regret raising a Brady violation. I represent my client and I answer to my client. So I'm going to do what's in the best interest of my client.
Oh, I was so excited for you. And it's also worth pointing out here for those of you in the chat who don't know, and I looked this up because on September 19th, which was during the trial, the Justice Department announced a massive federal investigation of the Rankin County Sheriff's Office for allegations of a pattern and practice for violation of civil rights. And this happened during the trial.
Oh yeah.
So of course your back was up a little bit when that happened. And then you find out that there may be these messages that they didn't turn over. I mean, look, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, several months before, 6 officers from the Rankin County Sheriff's Department had been convicted of torture and several other just horrific, like planting evidence in crime scenes, targeting members of the community, typically people who don't have the kind of resources to fight back.
Well, we saw something like exactly like that in Massachusetts. We watched the Karen Reed trial, which turned out to be, it was 9 weeks of testimony.
Mm.
They were alleging it was a hit and run case, a drunk driving hit and run of a Boston police officer. There was like, hardly, there was no injuries to match up with pedestrian. There was cover up allegations. And now many of the investigating officers are under internal affairs investigation, and she's going to be retried. So we know what you're saying when you're saying, patterns of violations, civil rights. A lot of people want to know, let me see, let me get to this, how they can help. What can we do to help? Thank you, honey and sea salt. They want to know, what can we do to help? Can we put money on her books? Thank you, Zelda. They want to know, can we send her letters? Can we help with the cost of specialists, reports, etc.? So sad for Carly. Thank you, Brooklyn Janet. Can I write to her? If so, where? Let me just get all these at the same time because they're all kind of the same thing. Thank you, ha ha ha. It says, is thanking you for advocating for Carly. What can we do to help ensure that Carly gets the justice and rehabilitation treatment that she deserves? And then, thank you, Cat Artist, for your super sticker. Groovy Cheryl says, is there a place that we can send letters to her? And why was the issue of weapons being too available for a young girl suffering from emotional and medical issues? Yeah, that was not brought, I guess, was that precluded from being brought up?
Well, no, but I think people have to remember this is Mississippi and people love their guns in Mississippi. Nobody really saw that as an issue here.
I'm a New Yorker. Like, it's just, it's not like that. We're seeing, school shooters' parents being prosecuted all over the place for the child having access to a weapon. In Michigan, we're going to see it in Georgia. And I'm thinking like, okay, if let's say she didn't no, nothing like that.
No, we don't have any laws like that here. Now, I'm not saying we won't get them as more and more states seem to be adopting them, but I would be surprised if we got them because I swear I think the NRA should set up office in Mississippi. People love their guns.
So if Carly got a hold of that same gun and went to school and shot up the school, her parents would not have been prosecuted.
No, that they wouldn't have been because, again, we don't have laws like that. And even if they passed a law like that tomorrow, the law does not work retroactively. You can't say that something that wasn't illegal in March, you can now press charges because we've made this new law making it illegal now in September. So no, but we don't have laws like that in Mississippi.
Is there a way to fund her commissary account?
Yes.
Yes.
The problem is right now, we don't know where Carly will be going when she gets to the new facility. But once she leaves the Rankin County Detention Center, she can't transfer funds from her. And so, I would love to be able to tell you a place to send cards to her, but we don't know where she's going to be housed until they move her next week.
So maybe you can come back and tell us and we can let everybody know, or if you don't want to come back on the show, you can just tell me and I'll post it. Could Bridget set up an Amazon wish list for Carly? That might be an idea of something that we could do. We know that you and Kevin Camp have been representing Carly for free because she did not qualify for a public defender. So if there's any way financially, people are asking if they can help. Is there any way that people can help?
Yes, her maternal grandfather and maternal aunt have set up a GoFundMe for Carly for appeal expenses, and hopefully we'll get a new trial, and that would help go for additional experts and just transcript expenses, everything like that. I think I sent you the link that.
Yeah, I have it here. I'm going to post it right in the chat. So hopefully. It looks like it's brand new. It looks like they just started it. So I'm going to post it here in the chat for anyone who would be so kind to donate. Wait, actually, let me see if there's a better way to share that. Share, copy. I know that there's so many here. That's probably the better link who are,
somebody who just said Dr. Pickett could see the evil in her. I don't think Dr. Pickett could see the hand in front of his face if it was given a microscope. But also, let's talk about that. People like to throw words like evil around. Well, what is evil? Can you do a bad thing and still be a good person? Well, yeah, the Bible tells us that. Human nature tells us that. So how do you define evil? Is it evil to cheat on your wife? Because the Bible also tells us that no sin is greater than the other. So if you look at porn, which I'm sure you do, are you evil? Like, I mean, how are we
No,
judging?
not me. You didn't mean me looking at porn. You meant whoever that was.
Yeah, whoever that was. Yeah, not you.
No, not me. I don't look at porn. Right. Right. Another question that I've pinned the GoFundMe to the chat, so you guys have it there. I had a question about religion and whether religion might have played a part in this, because Carly had told, I think Dr. Pickett made a big deal about saying that Carly maybe wrote in her journal that she was an atheist or she wasn't believing in God. And then he, brought up some other religious stuff. And then we saw, I think was it Rebecca Kirk who said, oh, I told Carly I was a Christian just because, so people that are, up here in the Northeast, I'm just going to say that we don't live in the Bible Belt. It's different here. I don't, that kind of stuff. A lot of the people from the Northeast, I think, were very surprised by that testimony. And then somebody brought the question, like, do you think maybe the jury, if this is the Bible Belt and, maybe people were thinking, oh, she's an atheist. Let's just, did that play any role in your opinion?
I don't know. It's hard for me to know, or really any of us to know, what played a factor to the jury, or how much anyone affected the jury more than the other. I did not personally feel like the comment about being an atheist or anything like that had anything to do with the price of tea in China, but the answer to whether or not that had an effect or toll on the jury, I'm just not sure. To me, it didn't. I'm from Mississippi. I was born and raised here, but I went to grad school at part of my college I did at the American University of Dubai. I went to graduate school at Florida State and went to law school at Indiana University in Bloomington. So, I mean, I've sort of traveled over outside of the Bible Belt. But to me, it didn't strike me as odd. I think here a lot of people want to take their kids to Christian counselors or want a faith-based counselor. It's not my preference, but I can understand why that might be important to some people.
I forgot about this because I wanted to talk to you about this too. So in your closing, this is why I was convinced that you were watching the coverage on this and that you must have been watching comments and that you must have known that people were suspecting that maybe there was like some SA or CSA, we have to say on YouTube for lack of a better term, between, Heath and Carly. You brought it up in your closing that the easiest thing that she could have done would be to make up a lie that she was being molested by Heath, and she didn't do that. And people were wondering, why did you do that? Why did you bring it up?
Well, I brought it up because, I think that if somebody was going, if Carly was going to be telling a lie about this, about what happened on March 19th, or, what led her to shoot her mom, I mean, what's the easiest thing to say? What's the most sympathetic thing to say? And you don't have to make a far jump to get there. It would have been, and I worked in the Hinds County Youth Court as a guardian ad litem, which is an attorney for kids, for 2 years right out of law school. And we dealt with a lot of abuse cases. And, and as you know, I do a lot of civil work. I do a lot of family law work. And there are oftentimes, not frequently, but every now and then, a parent wants to get an advantage in a custody case. And so they'll make an allegation of SA against another parent or another parent's spouse. And we see that. And it would have been an easy lie to tell. It would have been convenient for Carly. If Carly was some evil, maniacal, diabolical person.
Master manipulator. Don't forget master manipulator.
Master manipulator, callous, calculating. She sure as hell could have come up with a lot better story than what she had. Mm-hmm. I think that sort of shows you that she was telling the truth, because the truth did not serve Carly as well as a lie could have served Carly. And if Carly was callous and diabolical and calculating and a sociopath and a psychopath with no feelings or remorse for anyone, she could have victim blamed all day long and said, I just couldn't take it anymore. My stepdad had been molesting me for years and my mom knew about it and did nothing. And on the way home, and I was smoking marijuana to try to repress those memories. And on the way home from school that day, I told my mom, I confronted her, and she told me I was making it all up. And I knew my stepdad was coming home that night, and I couldn't take it one more time. And people would have bought it all day long. They would have, I mean, it would have gotten her a massive.
And that's what the people were thinking anyway. So masterfully, you worked that into your closing without even knowing that that's what everybody was saying, because you weren't.
No. I just thought it would help kind of explain, like, look, we know what we're talking about is not something people see every day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we get that. It's hard to explain. It's an odd situation. You don't see this. This is rare. It's difficult to explain. It's not often that you see kids having symptoms of bipolar 2 disorder or schizophrenia, but it runs in her family.
Right. On both sides.
On both sides.
On both sides. It's like she won the bipolar lottery.
I
and
know.
her father's a schizophrenic. Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah. And, you know, another thing with Dr. Pickett that stood out to me, and I don't know why it didn't stand out more to the jury, is that he was so focused on, you know, Carly's dad being prescribed Adderall, but didn't seem to pay any attention to the 3 antipsychotic medications the man was on at the same time.
When I went back and watched that testimony again, you know, I was like, he spent so much time on Kevin Gregg's medical records. Like, and if I was treating a patient with ADHD, I never would have given him Adderall. And it went on. I'm thinking, like, what? Why is this even like a big part of your testimony?
And the only medical records we had for Kevin Gregg was from that one doctor, and it was all of 4 or 5 pages. So, and that was just all we had access to, because it's not like Mr. Gregg was cooperative or really even in the state of mind to be cooperative or helpful.
But like, he spent so much time analyzing that.
Yeah.
Cat lady, what about the prosecutor telling the jury that Carly can get out in a year if they give her life with parole? That was one thing. Also, the prosecutor brought up in closing what I was hearing for the first time about Carly's promiscuity and there being a sex toy at the scene. Where did that come from? Why was she allowed to say that?
I don't know, because it sure wasn't in evidence. It sure wasn't a fact in evidence. But when they processed the crime scene, they did find, I'm sorry, it's my dog. They did find a sex toy in Carly's bedroom, but it was like a gag gift that a friend at school gave Carly, because they're 14-year-olds. They find this stuff hilarious. You know,
all the people that say like she was leading a double life, she had a secret boyfriend.
Her mom knew about the boyfriend. They approved. They didn't mind her dating the boyfriend at all. I mean, that was testified to, I think, multiple times. And it's not a secret life. I mean, Carly had an old iPod that she had downloaded Snapchat on. I mean, I think it's odd to me that you have a 14-year-old who's in the 10th grade and you're not letting her have it's a parent's choice to decide whether someone gets access to social media or not. But I mean, at some point you can't stop kids from looking at Snapchat. I mean, they're kids. I mean, that's what they want to see. Like, that's not some, sinister behavior. That's just a kid. They want to be on social media with their friends.
They tried to make it sound like that. Deborah, thank you, says, I wanted to see her innocent by insanity. There are too many teens having reactions to psych meds. She isn't the first. She should be in a psych ward. Thank you. Jenny, are you planning? Jenny wants to know if you are planning to appeal. This case breaks my heart.
Yes, we announced our appeal on the record last Friday. We are currently, before we can file a notice of appeal, we have to file our motion for new trial, which we're hoping to do tomorrow and get that in.
Okay. As soon as I can get access to those documents, I'll go over them with the viewers from the court file. Do you expect the women in prison to treat her in a motherly way? Joanna wants to know.
I pray they do. I know that our prisons are filled with mothers who aren't able to see their children. And so I'm hoping that will be what happens. But at the end of the day, none of us can really know.
Thank you. Fairy Raven, thank you. Because she's intelligent, can you do educational courses or study where she's going?
I believe they do have some programs now where you can get your GED. I don't know. I mean, it depends on the individual facility she's at, what courses they'll offer. I know they do have some work programs.
Lawyer's daughter, Pickett was diabolical. 2 of my kids saw wonderful pediatric psych, life-saving Clark's analysis was in line with our doctor. So wish the state took developing mind into account.
Me too.
Minnesota Swissel, thank you for the 10. Minnesota family speak at schools about their son taking his life while in a cannabis-induced psychosis. Speak about the dangerous effects of cannabis on an ADHD adolescent brain. Maybe this can help Carly. I had those thoughts too about the fact that it may have been like synthetic marijuana. And what the hell was in that vape? If it was like,
Yeah.
got it from a friend, like you have no idea what was in there, right?
Yeah. We don't know because they never tested it. So we can't tell you. But, one of the things that I really took issue with and am raising in our motion for new trial is the state wanted a jury instruction to voluntary intoxication. But then in his closing, Michael said, this is not a case about marijuana. Well, I mean, I agree. So why are we talking about voluntary intoxication? Nobody said Carly had smoked marijuana that day. All of the testimony from her friends who would have known was consistent in that Carly didn't even start smoking marijuana at all until February of 2024. I mean, there just isn't, I don't think there was any marijuana-induced psychosis because, A, Carly hadn't smoked marijuana long enough. The marijuana was being used to treat the symptoms that the mental health symptoms that Carly was experiencing. She mainly took it to help her sleep at night because it was impossible for her to sleep, which is in line with bipolar disorder, to help calm her racing thoughts, which is in line with bipolar disorder. And that's not rare or unusual for people experiencing mental illness or really anything in life to turn to substances to self-medicate.
It's very common, I think, with people who have mental illness to escape. It's an escape. People who are survivors of abuse often will turn to drugs to escape the memories and the trauma. And I found that really easy to understand. That a lot of people apparently didn't. Science Sleuths, is there a way we can support Bridget since she's doing all this pro bono, for instance, a fund to try and get that brain scan? Well, I put the GoFundMe in the chat. Is that where that money will go? Yes.
I mean, it's going to go to any litigation appellate needs for Carly and her case.
Thanks, Carol, for both of your super chats. Linda Vergata says, Bridget Todd is not a cupcake. That's what I say. I'm not a cupcake. Because I have this pink sign over here and, I have 5 kids and it says, you can't make everyone happy. You are not a cupcake.
Truth.
It's my mantra. I'm not a cupcake. When is there ever a time where all of your kids are happy at the same time? Never. I can't make everyone happy. I just can't. And so if people don't like it, they don't need to stick around. Angela, thank you for becoming a member. Good.
I think my mantra, at least for the weekend, would have been, I'm like a taco. Every now and then I fall apart.
Good. Thank you to all these new members. Wolfie Muse, thank you. Welsh Paul, thank you. Claire, Laura, thank you so much. Christine, smash that like cupcakes. Everybody out there. Thanks, Margaret, for being a member for 9 months. Let me just see if there's any new other comments that I had starred. People who say people with no mental illness, as Sadie said, do not commit a crime against the mother. I mean, that's the way I'm looking at it. Like how any sane person would not have done this, but.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we keep going back to is that there's just no motive and people just don't go home from school and shoot their mom for no reason, especially when what you see from the video is there was no provocation. There wasn't a fight. Nobody seemed mad. Her mom didn't even seem upset.
Toy Thomas, I believe, is local to the area. I think you maybe even be a journalist, Toy, because I saw your comment the other day, who says teachers supported her as well, but weren't allowed to testify. Where was her bio dad during all this? Well, he's in the wind.
Yeah. He's not coming to court. He's not talking to attorneys. He sort of thinks we're all government agents out to get him.
Yeah.
Which is a part of schizophrenia.
Yes. Yeah. And he's diagnosed. Somebody says, please still visit Carly if you can. And I think you will and are.
Every day.
And I think the last thing here is, where is it? How is she doing now?
Carly is holding up better than I think most people could under the circumstances. And I think a lot of that is the high dose of Abilify that she's on, the mood stabilizer, and the antidepressant that she's taking, which was also increased last week. So I think that's a lot of it. I think one part is Carly feels, hopeful and relieved by the idea of not having to be in solitary confinement anymore. I mean, I think just knowing that she doesn't have to be kept in that state is something that she like is giving her in an odd way, like a sense of relief, you know, like I won't have to be by myself all day long anymore, because that just takes such a toll emotionally.
Make anybody crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like she knows, we talked in the back when we were waiting for sentencing, that no matter what, this wasn't the end. We were going to appeal. We were going to ask for a new trial. That we had a lot of case law that supported the fact that she was not given a fair trial, based on both the fact that I don't know how you give a 14-year-old a trial by a jury of her peers, and the fact that she has a Sixth Amendment right and a due process right to call witnesses in her defense, and they were timely disclosed in accordance with both the Mississippi case law and the Mississippi Rules of Criminal Procedure.
Mama She, thanks for the 10. Ms. Todd, has she told you her memories from that day?
She has, and it's similar to what you heard in court from Dr. Clark. I mean, you don't remember what you don't remember, and it's my understanding from the experts is it just, once it's gone, it doesn't really come back.
It's really scary. It's really scary. This world that we're living in, where we send a 14-year-old away for life without ever having the possibility for parole or any rehabilitation. Before we jump here, everyone hit the like button and subscribe. And I'll just say, is there anything else, Bridget, that you would like to say in closing? I'll give you the full screen, and then I'll come back. We'll say goodbye, and then you and I can talk backstage.
Perfect. I just want to thank everybody who's being supportive of Carly, who has offered to write letters to her. I'll make sure that you get the address for where she's going. For everyone who has gone into this case with an open mind, and you know, for anybody who's experiencing any mental health issues in your family, with yourself, with your children, I hope that if anything good can come from this case, it will help you realize maybe what's going on with your own kids, and maybe not to pass judgment on others, but also maybe to take some of the stigma away from mental health that we see every day, and maybe not be so quick to judge other people until we know the full story. Also, I would hope that we would all be writing to our legislatures to make sure that our states have laws that protect children from being tried as adults, and from being put in adult detention centers and adult facilities. I mean, I don't know how anybody could feel safe knowing that a 15-year-old little girl is fixing to go into an adult jail filled with adults. I mean, it horrifies me.
It horrifies me too. Thank you so much for doing this today. Monique, thank you, says just donated and praying for attorney Todd and Carly's motion tomorrow. Well, she's just filing it tomorrow. It's going to take a long time to be heard, but when you're on TV again, we'll broadcast it live and talk about it. If the motion's accepted, I highly recommend Dr. Peter Bregan.
We reached out to him, but his wife wouldn't let him come because she says he's too old to fly.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, you're kidding.
Reached out to him. He helped us find Dr. Clark.
Oh, he did. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Monique. Look at you know some tea, some stuff, some great information. Thank you so much. And thank you for your advocacy, not only for Carly, but for really, you know, this case is bigger than Carly too. You know, this is about our children and how we're so quick to try them as adults. 14 is a lot different than 17, you know? And their frontal lobes aren't even, you know, fully formed until something like, I don't know, I'm not an expert in frontal lobes, but they're definitely not fully developed at 14. And I think that we need to talk about the tough topics and let people know what's going on and how to fix it, and tell Carly that we are all thinking about her.
Yeah, I will.
And give her a hug from all of us. And thank you to my chat and my viewers and my channel members and my moderators for making this a classy place to be, and just for your kindness and grace. And yeah, again, like, okay, you want to act like an adult, deal with the consequences. This is what, you know, like every third comment is like that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if she wants to deal with the consequences, then let's start giving 14-year-old license and let them drive. Let's give them the right to serve in the military. Does that give you pause? Would you want your 14-year-old going to Iraq in the military, or is that a little too young?
Mhm.
Because if it's going to be the same, it needs to be the same across the board.
And you can't even serve on a jury in Mississippi until you're 21. Think about that.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and then again, the jurors who didn't even know what life without parole meant. They
Yeah.
had a
And I
problem with
don't
that
think they
definition.
knew.
These are the
Yeah.
people deciding how long a 14-year-old girl is going to stay in prison. Well, she's
Yeah.
15 now, but
Well, and I do think I think that was an issue. And one of the things that I noticed is when the jury, after they asked that question and they came back out for sentencing, several of the female jurors had tissues in their hand as if they and appeared very emotional. And it just stood out as odd to me, because if they really thought Carly had the intention to kill her mom and knew what she was doing when she did it, I don't know, why they would have been emotional about sentencing her to begin with, if they felt like the crime fit the punishment. And secondly, I don't know why they would have been emotional about giving her life in prison if they knew what that was.
and I really thought they were going to leave it up to the judge.
I did too. I was surprised that they didn't, actually.
But when they came back in 2 hours, in less than 2 hours, I knew that it was going to be guilty. I just had that
Yeah,
feeling.
yeah. I mean, we all do. The
I thought we'd have a
shorter
couple of
period
days to
of time.
digest the whole trial, but we did not.
I'd hoped that.
Anything else you want to say?
No, just thank you all for your support of Carly and for having open minds. And thank you for having me to discuss the case.
Thank you for coming on. Good night. Goodbye, everyone. And thank you so much. And if you'd like to donate, I've pinned the GoFundMe for Carly's Defense Fund in the chat. Bridget and Kevin Camp have taken this case on for free. They have worked tirelessly for free since first being retained in March of 3 days after Ashley Smiley's killing. So thank you for everything that you do, and thank everyone for watching. Smash the like button on your way out, share the stream, raise awareness, and just, keep on keeping on. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you soon. Peace.